You're listening to the weekly Dartscast, and now your co-hosts, one-time UK Open Riley's qualifier participant Alex Moss, and the one-time VIP guest of Barry Hearn, Burton DeWitt. 180! Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast in association with Darts Corner. I'm Alex Moss, and joining me, he's back after having last week off, is Mr. Hang Tight himself, the darts statistician Burton DeWitt. Great to have you back, Burton. How are you doing?
Just a little tense watching our women in the Olympic semifinal in football right now. It's an extra time. Hopefully we can find that winner. You'll find out during this show, and if it goes to penalties, you'll certainly find out at the end of the show. Otherwise, I'm doing fine. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing well, thank you. And yeah, fingers crossed they can get the job done. It's been a busy few weeks for the show. We had our producer, Hannah, in Blackpool. I was in Blackpool twice myself as well. And I've been to a couple of events since we last spoke. The UKDA National Finals weekend here in Bolton. And then last week, I was at one of the Players' Championships in Milton Keynes. And it brings us nicely onto our question of the week, sponsored by Condor Darts. The day I was at the Marshall Arena was the Thursday for Players' Championship 16, and it saw a new name added to the ProTour Roll of Honour. Mike Dedeker winning his first PDC senior title, beating Ricky Evans in the final. And the question that we've asked our listeners this week, and what we're going to discuss now, is what is the ceiling for Mike Dedeker in the PDC? And the options that we've put on our poll on Twitter: top 8, top 16, top 32, or below the top 32. What are you going with?
I'm certainly not going with below the top 32. I don't think there's a question that his ability is well beyond that. You know, so far this year, he's 12th in averages in the Players' Championship events, and that doesn't tell the entire story because historically he's been a bit hit or miss. And, you know, he'll have a 109 average, but then have an 86 average. But over the last few months, we've seen a bit more consistency, and particularly in eliminating those low-end matches. You go back to the second half of last year where he really, you know, the first half of last year, he had really emerged, got himself into the majors, and was moving up the rankings and was looking like the real deal. But in the second half of the year, from July on last year, in 32 Players' Championship matches, he averaged in the 80s in 11 of them. That's, you know, more than a third of the time he was averaging below 90. This year, it's been, you know, the start of the year, he was a little bit less consistent, but he's been really good as of late. And his A game, as I said, was, you know, 108, 109 level, as the United States scores to take a 1-0 lead in the 96th minute. But it's also, it still is a bit bizarre because I don't think he was anywhere near his best over the days in Milton Keynes. He certainly had some consistency, and that's why he won the title. And, you know, you look at those averages, they were all in the mid 90s except for the two matches against Jose de Sousa and the final against Ricky Evans. And that will win titles. But it wasn't the high-flying stuff most of the way that we expect when he's really clicking. It was a 94, a 96, a 93 that was getting him over the line. And he was doing it against players that you would expect him to win against for the most part. Yes, he beat Dave Chisnall. Yes, he beat Brendan Dolan. But those were the only top 32 players he had to go against en route to the title. And the only other top 32 players he played across the 3 days, that he won against over those 3 days, were Peter Wright, who is in anemic form right now, and Danny Noppert, who's also gone a bit off the boil as of late. So, yeah, he made a quarterfinal, won a title, made a board final, but he had relatively kinder draws to do it. And there still are some questions about exactly where his game is. It wasn't that long ago that he was struggling to win a match. You know, he lost 3 consecutive first rounds early in the year. He couldn't even get to a board final from Players' Championship 2 all the way up until June after that one. So there are still questions in his game. And while this past week, this certainly helped write his season. It's put him from outside to fairly comfortably in the Grand Prix. We'll come on to that later. It's obviously locked up his spot, or almost locked up his spot, in Minehead for the Players' Championship final, and it gives him a lot of confidence going into the second half of the year. But there still isn't the results to match being the 12th best player in terms of average this year. He's still only played 41 matches. He's only won 26 out of 41 matches, despite having the 12th highest average. And part of that comes down to the fact that there was a lot of inconsistency, particularly at the beginning of the year, and particularly in the second half of last year as well, that I still want to see him eradicate. It was a very good week, and he's a player with a heap of potential. He's unquestionably top 32 potential. And if he's 12th in averages, that probably means he's also top 16 potential. But I'm going to say right now top 16, because there's just still some inconsistencies he needs to work out before I can believe that he's a top 8 player.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Mike Decker, a player with a lot of potential, but for a lot of people, we want to see more from him, don't we? And looking at the poll at the moment on Twitter, do go and have your say if you haven't already. 12% going with top 8, 49% going with top 16, 28% going with top 32 and below the top 32, which is where he is at the moment. 11% of our listeners going with that, but currently 36th on that order merit, just under 25 grand off the top 32 now. But I think it is that top 16 that is a bigger jump, and he's basically got to double his current earnings from the last 2 years and add another 50 to 60 grand on top. So I think making that jump from a top 32 to a top 16 player, that is one of the hardest things to do in the PDC, and you've got to be qualifying for almost all of the major ranking events each year, and you've also got to be picking up wins in them and going on runs. You just look down at that list of players in the top 16 at the moment, you've probably got just under half of them have got a major ranking title in the last 2 years. Then the rest of them, they've either got to a final or a semi-final or a quarter-final and backed it up with titles on the floor or gone on some runs on the Euro Tour as well. So in the case of Mike Decker, I think that's going to be the sticking point to this question, is how much further can he go? And with this title that he's got on the floor and some of the stuff that we've seen on the Euro Tour, can he take that onto the TV stage? Because he's someone that has been making steady progress over the last few years. This is the second run that he's had with a tour card. He had one for a couple of years, 2016 to 2017. He had 2 years without one. But since he's got back on the tour in 2020, this is his 5th consecutive season with that tour card. And he is well established now, even before last week winning the title. He's broken into that top 64, the top 50, the top 40. The next step is that top 32. And like I say, not far away from that at all. And last year, we did see him get to more of the majors, like you mentioned. He got to the match play, he got to the Grand Prix, and that's not the world's top 32 in the rankings that make up those two events. But generally speaking, you get from those two events, most likely, if you're going to get into them, you are one of the best 32 in the world at that time or during the months leading into it. And this year, we didn't see him make the match play, which might be seen as a step back in his progression, having been to Blackpool last year, making his debut. But on the flip side, maybe missing out on the match play this year, that's made him a little bit more hungry to push on again and put more hours in on this practice board, because these 3 Players' Championships that we had last week, they were the first events after the match play. And if you didn't qualify for that event, that's a good 3 or 4 week break you've got without playing in a PDC tournament. So he's had some time to dwell on it, not making the cut, but he's also, I think, gone back to the drawing board, worked on his game, and we saw it last week, the work that he's put in. A quarter-final on the first day, then the next day goes all the way, wins the title, and like you say, that final against Ricky Evans, almost 105 average, that's right at the end of the day, and to get over the line, do something that you've not done before and win a title. So I think it is definitely a key milestone for Mike Decker, but like you said, I think we need to see more from him. We need to see more of that consistency, and I think in the TV events, the majors, which we're going to see more of him in this year, if he can make those runs, start to pick up some wins, then yeah, I think top 16 is certainly within his remit of what he can achieve.
Well, there's just 10 events to go now before the cutoff for the World Grand Prix in Leicester. A really tight race with currently, I think it's 6 players who are within £5,000 of the last spot, and plenty more who are a good run like Mike DeDecker had this past week in Milton Keynes from moving into the field. But how do you assess the race with only 10 events to go before the cutoff?
Well, firstly, I've got to say I was a bit surprised when I was putting together the spreadsheet that there is only 10 events to go now. It seems like we are getting into the final furlongs now, the final few months in this race to get to Leicester. And I was just comparing the provisional field as things stand, comparing it to what we had at the World Match Play last month. And usually there's not too many changes between the two events, and that is the case at the moment. There's only going to be two changes as things stand. Andrew Gilding and Christoph Ratajski set to miss out, and coming in are Mike DeDecker and Cameron Menzies. And we've just spoken a lot about Mike DeDecker, so I'll talk about the other player there, Cameron Menzies, and it would be a debut for him in one of these two landmark events, the Match Play or the Grand Prix, and he wasn't far off in the end from getting into the Match Play, was he, this year? The last event before the cut-off, that Players' Championship, he did have James Wade sweating a little bit. He was in that last spot, but Cameron needed a title to climb above him, ended up just falling short, losing out in the semi-finals. But last week, he had some good runs, two quarterfinals in the last two events, and the standout win, that 108, almost 109 average against Josh Rock on the Thursday, and Josh would go on to win the title the next day as well. But also back-to-back ton plus averages on Friday against Westall Nyman, a first-time finalist on the Pro Tour last week on the Wednesday, and then Gerwyn Price as well, two more wins there, and that has helped him build up a decent buffer on 17th place in the Pro Tour list. He's just under $7,000 ahead of Dirk van Dijvenbode, so he's put himself in a very good position to get to the Grand Prix. And just a word on the Ober genius, Dirk van Dijvenbode, because there were signs last week, I thought, in Milton Keynes that his form is coming back. On the Wednesday and the Thursday, played 5 games, and he averaged between 96 and 104 in all the Lem, and he lost to Raymond van Barneveld in the first round on the first day, but the next day picked up 3 wins, got to the last 16, and then Friday come unstuck against friend of the show Reese Griffin on the stream. I think Reese might be Dirk's bogey player. He's beaten him a couple of times now, but what does Dirk do the next day? Puts that disappointment behind him, throws a 115 average against Mervyn King in the Euro Tour qualifiers, and it's the first time that we've seen Dirk play in those qualifiers for the Euro Tours since before the pandemic, which shows you how long he's been and how long he's been established in that Pro Tour top 16 or qualifying for these events. But bar one game in those qualifiers, he averaged 95 and above, qualified for both of them, money on the board already for those 2 Euro Tours, and he is already in the other 2, 9 and 10, so he's going to be in all 4 Euro Tours before the cut-off for the Grand Prix, and very, very close to James Wade now for that last Pro Tour spot. So I think he's definitely one to watch out for in this race.
Yeah, I agree that it looks like Dirk van Dijvenbode is coming back into form, and it obviously, it took some time battling through the injuries at the back end of last year for him to find his game again, and it has hurt him, not just literally the injury, but hurt him that it took so long, because I think he lost his confidence even as he got healthy again, because he's missed out on Blackpool already. And there's still a very good chance that he's going to miss out in Leicester. But I think he's too good of a player to miss out again going forward. I think he's moving back in the right direction again. And he, has himself in the race. And I think that's step one. Getting himself so that he's back in contention to qualify for the majors is key. And the way you do that is what you mentioned. It's winning through those Euro Tour qualifiers, especially since there's fewer spots now. If you're able to win through one of the two, you've done your job. He won through both of them. He's now in the next 4 Euro Tour events. He's in by right through the Pro Tour Order of Merit for 9 and 10, but he's now qualified for 11 and 12. That is going to be key. He already has the qualification money on for 11 and 12. He's going to have to win his first round match to get it for the other two, but that puts him right there. But that is only half the job, because James Wade is in all 4 of them, and his money hasn't been added yet because he's a Pro Tour qualifier. Same too for someone like Andrew Gilding, who's just outside, Callan Ritz, who's just outside. They will have to win their matches to have that money count. And if they do win their matches, it's immediately 2,500 quid that gets added on. It's a lot of money if you are able to win when you're one of the automatic qualifiers that first match. But there are, I'm not going to talk about my dark horses now because we'll come onto that later, but they're not the only ones that are in that race. Joe Cullen needs to win as well. He's right for the first time in a long time in danger of missing out. And there's other players outside who aren't necessarily in all of them, but are in some of them that are going to be key. Alan Suter, just a few £1,000s out. He's in Euro Tour 10. Cameron Menzies is in 2 of them. Jermaine Watamina is in 2 of them. Gabriel Clemens is in 2 of them. And especially Suter, Menzies, and Watamina are all playing really well. Gabriel Clemens a little inconsistently. If they're able to go on a run, they'll shoot up. But they all have a lot of work to do. It's going to likely be somewhere in the vicinity of £55,000 that you need to qualify. And right now, there's only 11 people on the ProTour order merit there. Mike Decker is almost there. Joe Cullen, a couple of wins in Euro Tour events in his first match will get him there. For everyone else, though, there is still a lot that needs to be done. And winning a Players' Championship event or reaching a final or making the semifinal Euro Tour can really start to throw things up for grabs. It's a very tight race and a very difficult race to predict right now because of that. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing how it develops.
Yeah, it's an exciting race ahead to get to the World Grand Prix. But before the Pro Tour resumes, we have got the World Series taking place over the next 2 weeks in Australia and New Zealand. And let's bring in our first guest. He's going to be playing in both of those events. He is the first player from New Zealand to win a PDC Tour card. Here's our chat with Haupai Puha. I'm pleased to say we're joined by the first New Zealander to have a PDC Tour card, Haupai Puha. Thanks for the time again, Haupai. How are you doing?
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me. And I'm doing good at the moment. It's good to be home.
Glad to hear it. We're talking less than a week now before the World Series continues in Australia and New Zealand. How excited are you to be playing in front of your home crowd in Hamilton in a few weeks' time?
Yeah, I am looking forward to it. Eager to get back on the board, because obviously it's been a while since I've played a Pro Tour now, so just been practicing by myself, so you never know how it's going to go, but hopefully I play half decent. Don't mind if I win or lose, just hopefully I play half decent. Yeah, that's the goal.
Well, we'll come back to the World Series later, but lots to catch up on since we last had you on the show almost a year ago now. It was just before you were in Amsterdam playing the World Series finals, but not long after that, you and Ben Robb teamed up to win gold for New Zealand in the men's pairs at the WDF World Cup. You said it was an incredible feeling with the brother. What did that title mean to you?
Yeah, it was big. We don't generally get to play together very often, especially not in New Zealand. We get told, that's not fair and whatnot, because we were always the two fighting for wins in New Zealand. So, to get a win, and especially my first WDF World Cup was big for us.
And I remember when we last spoke, you said the goal for the rest of 2023 was to qualify for the William Hill, as you called the World Championship. I had to let you know that the new title sponsor was Paddy Power, but you achieved that goal. You won the Oceanic Masters and you were hitting 100 averages for fun that day. How proud were you of that win and the way you played?
Yeah, that was like I said, it was a goal, and all the steps leading up to it was good. I did lose obviously to Ben in the New Zealand qualifier, but getting the Oceanic and playing how well I did, I think it was fairly dominant in the end. I mean, I think I didn't have any match starts against me, so I was always the one leading in most games, or in all the games. It was big, it was a goal. Didn't quite perform at Paddy Power, but it was a good experience nonetheless.
Yeah, just touching on your Paddy Power experience, your first trip to Ali Pali, it was behind closed doors during the pandemic. So what was it like this time round, getting that full experience with the crowd?
Man, that was crazy. The crowd, the noise, it's like no other. It was deafening. Like at times when I was turning around, walking back, I found myself looking at the noise, looking at the crowd, and sort of took my mind off where I was.
Well, after Ali Pali, the focus moved on to Q School at the start of this year, and we know you've played Q School a few times before, 2021, 2022, but you missed 2023. So what persuaded you this year was the right time to have another go?
It was just a point where it was just good timing. The kids are a bit older now. Where we were with our life and our jobs, it was just... it was good timing. My wife was pushing me to go. Yeah, and there was no expectations. So I was able to play freely, which in the end, it was big.
Yeah, it worked out well. What a week it was, making history as the first player from New Zealand to win a tour card. Just take us back to the end of that first stage, because you finished 60th on the order of merit. You qualified pretty comfortably for that second stage, but how were you feeling going into that when the tour cards are on the line?
I still had to win games on day 3. I wasn't through after the first 2 days. It was a struggle. It was freezing cold. There were ponds and little streams around the venue that were frozen over. I had never been anywhere that cold before. I think it got to like -9 or something ridiculous like that. I got the flu at the same time, so that wasn't too good, or flu, or man cold, or cold, whatever you want to call it. So, I was struggling a bit. But I think I feel like when I have been sick before during big tournaments, and I tend to play better. I think when you're sick and you're thinking about, not coughing around people and hiding your symptoms, takes your mind off where you are, and it kind of helped, yeah.
May have been feeling under the weather, but the second day of the final stage, you go up against your World Cup partner, Ben Robb. You play Ben, I think, in the second round that day. What's it like playing him in an event like Q School when you're both fighting for that tour card?
Oh, it wasn't ideal. Obviously, we would love to get the tour card together, and we both needed the points. I feel like I guess if he had won that game, he probably would have went on to get the tour card as well. So yeah, out of the 400 or 500 odd people, well, no, that was second stage, 128 people or whatever. It was just, I guess bad luck that we had to draw each other in such a critical moment. But I always enjoy playing against Ben. And most of the time we don't play the best because we put so much pressure on each other.
That makes sense. And after 2 days of the final stage, you've got a few points in the bag. Then the third day, the wins keep coming. You're in the final and you're already on 9 points. At what point that day did you think that you had done enough to get a card?
Well, I wasn't sure. I got to 9, and then some of the PDC guys came up to me and was like, "Congratulations!" I'm still playing. Right? They think they've done the numbers, and we think that you've got it. I was like, "Well, I don't want to play anymore." And they were like, "Oh, well, for the integrity of the game, you have to keep playing." So I was like, "So why did you come up to me and say that?" So I played it out. I still don't feel like I played that great. I played good enough, obviously. One game at a time, I was just good enough to win some of those games, survived match starts in some of the games, but by no means was I playing great. I feel like I played better in some of the other Q schools, to be fair. But I was good enough to win games and accumulate points, and it worked out.
Yeah, it certainly did. And the guys at the PDC said that you'd done enough. After that day, 9 points on the board, you're top of the order of merit. You skipped the last day of Q School. Did you still go to the venue and watch the other players sweat it out?
I did. I went there to support Ben. I was trying to get him through there so that he could get a tour card with me. But it wasn't to be that day. And people were asking me, why didn't you play on the last day? I was like, I had enough points. There's no point taking away points from other people. That's how I thought about that last day. Plus, I was sick. I wanted a day off drinking, to be fair.
Well, you said after winning a tour card it was life-changing, and we spoke with Christian Perez a few weeks ago. He's from the Philippines. He's basing himself in Bristol with Dom Taylor. What's the logistics been like for you so far this year on the tour? Where have you been based whilst over here?
I have been in London, East London. Well, East Acton, West London. I've been staying with some Kiwis. There's some Kiwis there that are a sponsor, and yeah, there's 4 Kiwis in the house, well, including me. So that was good. And it was good for transport, public transport, close to, obviously, airports. So, yeah, it was a good place.
A good setup. And getting the tour card, you said you're off the tools, you were working as a roofer, now the focus was on playing darts, but obviously there's a lot of time away from the family. So how tough has that been, spending more time away from home?
Oh, that's the biggest, the hardest part is being away from home, being away from family. It is fairly lonely over there. Obviously, if I could afford to, I'd have my family with me. If I could play better and make more money, I'd have my family with me. But not yet. Small steps, and yeah, we'll get there, hopefully.
Definitely. Well, Christian, he missed a lot of events in his first year with his tour card last year because of visa problems. What's the situation like for you getting a sports visa and the travel restrictions? Are you able to play in all the events you want to? Because we've seen you pretty much in all the Players' Championships so far.
Yeah, it was easy just for me to stay there. I'm currently going through sports visa at the moment, so I can't actually come back into the UK until I sort that out.
We saw you missed this week's events on the Pro Tour, but as I say, you've played in all the Players' Championships before then. What was it like walking into that room for the first one? Because I remember when we spoke before about you had a brief taste of a Players' Championship a couple of years ago whilst you were at Lakeside, and that long day of travelling to playing one as a top-up player. Did that experience help adjusting to the surroundings?
Yeah, I think I've played in a lot of World Series now, so I'm fairly comfortable around a lot of the players, and most of the time those World Series has got the top players. So in that sense, it was just like another tournament. It's different walking in as a professional this time. A bit more pressure put on by myself, and especially the work that I've been putting in, and yeah.
I saw you did a few interviews in New Zealand after you won your card as well. What's the media interest been like since you got on the tour?
Not too bad. A couple of them were from Germany. I did do a couple when I got back, and another couple before the World Series. But darts in New Zealand isn't very big, especially not in that sense, with interviews and stuff like that. Unless, like, obviously, unless I start doing better and playing in the majors and getting better results, then it might start happening. But yeah, darts is a very small sport in New Zealand compared to some of the others.
Well, you said as well that you wanted to inspire the next generation of players in New Zealand. We saw from your social media your son's playing darts and in tournaments. How's he getting on?
Yeah, so I got back a few weeks ago, and the New Zealand Junior Nationals was on the weekend after I got home. So I was able to go there. There was 150 odd juniors. I got to do a workshop with them and just tell them my story and give them tips, and I guess, just show them or tell them my journey, how I got into it, how I've been going, and hopefully I inspired them to think bigger, work harder, and to one day be me or be Luke Littler, for that matter.
Away from the Oche, we know you're a keen golfer. You've played with Damon Heta and Luke Woodhouse. Have you managed to play much golf whilst being in the UK?
No, that was the second. So I played with Damo. We played 2 rounds of golf. The one with Damo and Luke Woodhouse was the second one, and we played 2 days prior to that. That's the only time I've been able to get out for a hit. Everyone's too busy. Everyone lives too far away. No one lives in London or near London, or anyone that plays golf anyway. So I would have liked to have played a bit more, but it just didn't happen. Didn't line up.
Fair enough. Well, more recently we saw you and Ben Robb team up again at the PDC World Cup, the first time that you two have played together in that event, and you ran Germany very close. You had 42 left in the decider. Gabriel Clemens decides to take out the 1-2-4 on the ball. How tough was that to take after you guys played so well?
It was good. I thought we might have got a shot, but fair play to Gabriel. He hit the shots that he needed to at the time, and that's why they're the pros that they are. That's what they do. Yeah, it was tough. More so, that was my first time playing there. Struggled with the heat. I was hiding in my room most of the time, hiding in my room with the aircon because it was just far too hot.
Well, we've got the joint walk-ons at the World Cup, but we've seen your walk-on a few times now. I think it's sung by a New Zealand youth choir. We love it. What made you pick that one?
That song is it's about where I'm from. So the State Highway 35 is a road that goes around the east coast of New Zealand, and it goes our homestead is still on that road. So where my father and siblings all grew up, the State Highway 35, it's still on that road. So we go back there, anytime we can. And that's what that song's got a big, it's got that's the meaning about it. Where I am from and where my family grew up, I guess.
Just a couple more before we let you go, and we know to pursue this dream of playing on the tour, there's a lot of support behind the scenes from family and friends, but also sponsors as well. You're backed by Shot, the New Zealand dart manufacturer. How much of a help have they been so far?
Oh, they've been big. So where I stayed in London, one of the Kiwis he worked for Shot. So he was a big help to me. I wouldn't even know where I'd stay if it wasn't for him. When I got my tour card, he sent me a message and said I got a bed in London. You don't have to worry about anything. So yeah, and obviously anything darts related, Shot provides for me, which is good. I've currently got a new barrel coming out shortly, so. I've been tinkering away for the last few months with a new prototype, which should come out shortly.
Well, we look forward to that. And lastly, let's finish up looking ahead. The World Series Down Under, then it's going to be back to the tour. But how special is it going to be in a couple of weeks to get back on stage in Hamilton, but this time, as you say, as a professional, a PDC tour card holder?
Yeah, it doesn't feel any different. I still feel like I'm the same person. Playing in front of Hamilton, it's awesome seeing all my shirts, noticing people that I know. That's big. Normally, obviously, in the UK and that, you just look out into the crowd and it's just people you have no idea who they are. So, so it is big to see faces in the crowd people not whistling. I'm looking forward to that.
Haupai, it's a pleasure to catch up with you. We appreciate the time. Best of luck for the World Series coming up and what else is to come in 2024 as well.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Haupai for joining us. Now looking ahead, we have got the World Series resuming this weekend, the PDC's annual trip down under, events in Australia and New Zealand. But of the 8 PDC representatives, who is this trip the most important for?
Yeah, I think there's an obvious answer. We kind of have both alluded to it earlier, but Peter Wright, who's really been struggling as of late. But it's just no way that I see him playing well. But then again, every time we think he's finished, he pulls something out of the bag, including last year at the European Championships. And maybe that's going to happen again. But I just don't see it. Peter Wright just seems to be completely gone, and it seems like these will very likely be his last World Series events unless something unexpected happens to turn his game around. So while it's the biggest for him in that regard, I'm not going to go with him as the answer. I'm going to go with the only PDC representative who is also an Oceanic player, and that's Damon Hedda. It's been a bizarre year, I'll say, for Damon. I mean, he's 9th in averages so far this year, and he's had some absolutely electric performances, not least of the one being the one against Luke Littler in Minehead in the UK Open, where he threw out the table topper in the Premier League and the reigning World Championship finalist in one of the matches of the year. But there's also been a lot of times where, especially on the big stage, he has not been up to snuff. And that is concerning because he seems so close to that big breakthrough. And yet at the same time, he also has never seemed further away at times. And going back home, as well as going to New Zealand, and to be the player that is not just there as the Oceanic representative, but as one of the 8 PDC representatives, is a huge opportunity for him. But it's also a huge chore for him. And I want to see how he handles it. He is one of the 10 best players in the world, in my opinion. At the very least, one of the 12 best. And he is a player who should be in the talk to make the Premier League because he's good enough and he's entertaining enough. And yeah, he likes to give the English crowd, at least, all the hell in the world. But everywhere else, he is a fan favorite. And even, I think, English crowds like him, even if he is taunting the English national team, the English cricket team at the Ashes every other year. But this is huge for him because he is one of those PDC representatives, and he's not had the big stage results, that Luke Littler match aside, that match his quality and his level of performances so far this year, especially on the floor. I want to see what Damon Hedda we get. He's so close to making a major final. He's so close to maybe lifting a major trophy, World Cup aside, but he's also so far, and he needs to show that he deserves to be one of the PDC representatives when it all counts in this tournament. So it's big for him. He's good enough for it. It's time, though, that he takes that step.
Yeah, I think there's a few possible answers here, and I like that shout with Damon Hedda. But for me, you mentioned him. The obvious one has got to be Peter Wright, and I saw Peter very briefly when I went to the Pro Tour last week. I just arrived at the venue. We were stuck in traffic, so we didn't get there until around 1:45, 2 o'clock. So the first round, it was almost halfway through, but we were getting a drink at the bar, and Peter walks through. He was one of the first players we saw, actually, and it was nice that he recognised me. I've not seen him in person for a while, and I'd seen that he'd won his first game and said, "Well done, good start to the day." And he joked saying, "I've won a game," like being in shock that he'd not lost it in the first round. And obviously that's Peter having a laugh at himself, but it does show you at the same time how far he's fallen, doesn't it? Because for me, it's kind of come full circle in a way, because I remember when I interviewed Peter for a feature for his local paper. This is going back nearly 10 years ago now, but we spoke about his career up to that point, and when he first went on to the Pro Tour in 2008, he earned £1,200 during the whole season, and he said that he'd lose games 6-5, but when he did win a first round game, he'd come off the board in tears because he'd won and he'd earned some money and he could afford to enter the next few events. And okay, Peter's earned quite a lot of money in darts since then. These Players Championship events, it's not the be all and end all for him now. It's not as drastic as it was back then. You're not going to see him in tears now if he wins a first round game in Milton Keynes or Wigan. But as someone who's followed his career for a long time, I do wonder if we're now coming into the final chapters of it, because I've got no inside knowledge or anything, but if Peter's current form continues, how much longer is he going to play for? Because we know he's going to be in all the ranking events, the majors, for a fair while longer, the rest of this year, next year. But beyond that, if he was to slip out of the top 16, then the top 32, does he come back from that? And I don't know the answer to that. But going back to this question, out of the 8 PDC representatives, who are these 2 events coming up down under the most important for? You could argue for Peter Wright, it might be his last time playing in the World Series events in New Zealand and Australia. The other 7, it's going to be a first time for the 2 Lukes, Littler and Humphreys going there, but the other 5, you'd expect to see them get a few more invites and be in that lineup for a lot more years to come. So they're all going to be going there to enjoy the trip, and I've never been, but from what I've heard, this Australia-New Zealand leg of the World Series is a special one for the players, and it's an experience they don't forget travelling to that part of the world. But at the same time, they want to perform, like you mentioned with Damon Heta, they want to get some results behind them to take into the Pro Tour and the big events coming up at the end of the year. But for me, out of the 8, I've got to go with Peter Wright. I think if he were to win one of these titles or make a final, you'd probably see the most emotion from him, and it would mean the most to him as well, given his current struggles on the Oche.
Well, let's continue to talk about the event down under, but let's shift to the Oceanic representatives, looking at the 8 there for this week and next week. Who have you got your eye on the most?
Well, it's been a common theme for me these last few minutes, talking about players that might be in the twilight of their careers. But when it comes to darts down under, Simon Whitlock's name is high on the list. He's been a regular in the World Series events in Australia and New Zealand over the years, and rightly so. He's been based in the UK for a long time now, but he's always flown the flag for Australia, and he deserves his place in the field. But again, I think we are coming into a potentially crucial 4 to 5 months in the career of Simon Whitlock. We're over halfway through the Players' Championships for this year now, after last week's events in Milton Keynes, and Simon Whitlock, he's got a lot of work to do to get to the World Championships. He's around $5,000 off the Pro Tour spots, which isn't a lot with so many events still left to go, but it's not a position that you want to find yourself in coming into August, September time, fighting for results to get to the World Championship. And looking at the tour card race, this is info via Dartsrankings.com. I'm sure many of our listeners use the site, but go and check it out if you haven't. But Simon Whitlock currently 56th on that post Ali Pally order merit, around 11.5 grand clear of 65th. So it's unlikely at the moment, but it's not completely out of the question that if Simon Whitlock misses the World Championship, he could end up losing his tour card. And does he go to Q School and try and win it back if that happens, or is he going to venture down another route, go to the World Seniors, the Modus Super Series? That's on his doorstep. If he was to do that way, we're probably not going to see him in these World Series events next year. So I think for Simon Whitlock, he knows he's got a lot of hard work ahead of him when he gets back to the UK to get to the World Championship. But for these next 2 weekends, I think he can use these events as a chance to make that early start on rebuilding some confidence, finding some form, ready to take into those Pro Tours coming up. But beyond Simon, just a word on a couple other players, 2 Kiwis. I'd say the unofficial number 1 and number 2 for me from New Zealand. You've got Haupai Puha, who you heard from earlier, the first player from New Zealand to win a tour card, and someone that is improving all the time. And his World Cup partner, Ben Robb, who you're going to see next week in Hamilton. And our next guest you're going to hear from in a moment, Ben Francis, he reckons that Ben Robb is going to be the next Kiwi to get on the tour. And I can't argue with him, because I think Ben has got a lot of talent, a lot of potential, and I don't think it's going to be long before he makes a mark on the big stage. And it could be next week. He could go and beat one of those 8 PDC players.
I'm also curious to see how the how Haupai Puha does and how Simon Whitlock does, but I'm more interested here in seeing the players that we've never seen before try to give it a go and we don't know much about. You look at someone like Brenton Lloyd, who will be in the Australian Darts Masters this upcoming week. He's made 4 finals so far this year in the DPA Tour, and he's second in the order of merit behind Jeremy Fagg, who's won 2, including averaging over 90 in one of those, which doesn't sound like much, but if you look at the averages overall, they're usually mid-80s. And he averaged 93 and beating Brenton Lloyd in Geelong in April. But Lloyd's made 4 finals this year, and he's won half of them. And he's one of only 2 players who've won multiple events so far this year. But I'm also I want to see Joe Comodo making 2 finals himself, winning one of them. These are players we haven't seen, we don't know much about. I'm curious to see how they perform. But I do agree. It's huge for Simon Whitlock. He is really regressed. And, go back to the World Championships last year. It did look like that was the end for Simon Whitlock. He looked a beaten player. He looked a shell of himself. But he fought back, and he showed nerve and bottle in that match. And even though for much of it he looked the second best player, he had a fighting spirit, and he was able to turn that match against Paulo Narita around and come back and win it. And he's a player who's done that so often in his career. I mentioned earlier about Peter Wright. Every time we think he's done, he does something out of nowhere. Similar to Simon Whitlock, dropped out of the Premier League, hadn't won in years, and all of a sudden he wins 5 events in the space of 6 months and becomes one of the best players in the world again. But Simon Whitlock is not that player anymore. He's not even a top 64 player right now on current form. Just like it's an important week for Damon Hedda, it's also an important week for Simon Whitlock. I want to see how he takes back to the big stage, but I fear the worst for him right now, unless he draws Peter Wright, in which case I fear for all of us because the match might never end. But he's not the main reason I'm watching this. The main reason is to see these new players, assuming I do watch it because it'll be on at a weird hour. These players we haven't seen before, the Joe Comatos of the world and the Brenton Lloyds of the world. That's what I'm looking forward to this upcoming week.
And now we'll move on to our final guest on this week's show to give us more of an insight into darts in New Zealand. He is the former host of the At The Oche radio darts show in New Zealand. Here's our chat with Ben Francis. I'm pleased to say we're joined by the former host of the At The Oche radio show all the way from New Zealand, Ben Francis. Thanks for the time, Ben. How are you doing?
Yeah, hey guys, good to be back on. Really glad to talk to you guys again. Everything's going well down in this part of the world.
Glad to hear it. And we're talking less than a week before the PDC's annual stop down under for the World Series. Lots to catch up on, but let's just touch on those events coming up in Wollongong and Hamilton over the next 2 weekends. How much are you looking forward to seeing your home players from New Zealand take on the PDC stars?
Yeah, look, I think every time this year comes around, there's always a sense of excitement for some of these guys. It's a rare opportunity to play on the stage. Most of the guys, the Kiwi guys that is anyway, who are featuring this year have been on that stage before, bar one. So there's going to be another opportunity for them to really test themselves, see whereabouts they're at, especially heading into this time of year where we're going to have qualifiers for the World Champs and all sorts to play for as well. So, it's always really exciting, and as I say, it's always good to see those Kiwi boys up on stage, and it's a really good chance for them to play in front of a home crowd, get those cheers in front of those home supporters as well, because, that's an experience that some of them will never forget.
And we were talking off air, you said there's been a lot more mainstream media coverage for darts off the back of Luke Littler's emergence on the scene. So what has the interest been like in the game since his run to the World Championship final?
Yeah, look, firstly with that mainstream media, lots of it has been centred around Luke Littler in terms of just TV news coverage, radio news coverage as well, and even just generally more people just talking about darts. Look, I'd say there's been quite a few young people interested in the sport as well. It's really hard to kind of gauge at the moment, though, to be honest. It's because it's still fairly new, but I kind of compare it to when Fallon created history at the World Champs and how big of a moment that was to the sport. This was really next level. I had people talking to me about darts and people asking questions that I really didn't think actually really cared about the sport, and it's incredible that a 17-year-old has had that much of an impact on the game. And I think definitely lots of the excitement heading into the Darts Masters down here is seeing Luke Humphreys down here for the first time as well, because those two guys are just absolutely killing it in the sport at the moment, and there's definitely a lot of intrigue and a lot of hype around those guys. So getting the opportunity to see them in the flesh and hopefully see them play well and do some of the crazy things on the dartboard that they've been doing as well. People are hoping to be a part of history and witness that. I think part of that has probably been driven by the mainstream media coverage. Everything is usually driven around Luke Littler, so if there's a Luke Littler angle, that's going to be the main angle that's covered. But I think there's definitely been a few of the Kiwi boys getting a bit of coverage in some of the papers and on the radio as well, which is great to see for them.
Definitely. Well, let's talk about some of those Kiwi boys and rewind 12 months ago. We had you on the show just before last year's World Series events in Australia and New Zealand, and it was Johnny, Tata and Haupai Puha who both picked up wins on home soil. You were there covering the event as media as well. You spoke to them, you spoke to the eventual winner in Hamilton, Rob Cross. What was your experience like being there last year?
Yeah, look, it was of course the second year back after the break from COVID, and I think that last year rose to another level. I think is probably the best way to say it. It was the first time back. It was weird. It was like, oh my god, we're actually back. You know, there was a true sense of normality, even though things in New Zealand still weren't proper. Last year, it really felt like it was back. And look, seeing Johnny Tata, he beat Peter Wright in his first ever televised game. You know, that was such an awesome experience for him. And then the flow-on effect that had for him as well, going on to reach the WDF quarterfinals at Lakeside was, you know, such an awesome experience. I think he was the first New Zealander to reach that stage as well. So that was awesome. And even Haupai, just once again showing what he's capable of on stage and beating a top quality player. And look, we all know that Haupai is capable of those performances. He's done it before on the World Series stage, and you always look at performances like that and always think, you know, that can always instill a bit of confidence and belief. And hopefully, you know, that looked like that could have played a part in him becoming the first Kiwi to get a tour card, which is such an awesome story. And Rob Cross winning, look, great. I'm happy for him. You know, he'd come down here. First time was after he won the World Champs, and it was the first time I had seen Rob personally feeling a bit comfortable and relaxed because, as I said, first year down, he was just coming in as the world champion. There was a bit of it was almost kind of like that. The whole pressure of being the world champion got to him a little bit. He was feeling a bit fatigued. The year after, he was feeling a bit better about things, and then we had the COVID break and everything, and he came back. He looked like he was refreshed down here and probably the happiest to seen him. So overall, it was a great tournament. Getting two Kiwis winning on the stage, that's what we want to see, and hopefully get a couple more winners this year as well. We've got our fingers crossed.
We shall see. Well, sticking with Johnny Tata, you mentioned his run to the quarterfinals at Lakeside, but another player who caught the eye that week was Nicole, Regnaud, making her first appearance in the ladies' draw, pushing Eileen de Graaf all the way to a last leg. And we know the challenges for New Zealand players competing regularly in Europe. There's a lot of travelling and money, but do you think we're going to see Nicole maybe pursue more events over here, maybe play the Women's Series one day?
Oh, look, you like to hope so. You know, she's definitely got the capability. She's an awesome player. It was the Australian Open a couple of years ago, I think, that she beat Lisa Ashton up on that stage over there across the ditch. And you know, she's someone that has definitely got a lot of skill and someone who's young. She's been playing on the DPNZ tour this year as well, I've noticed, and testing herself against all the top players in New Zealand. So I'm sure that this year she's going to gain a lot of experience and be a better player for it. And look, anyone representing New Zealand on the stage, being such a small country, you always want to cheer and support them on. But someone who has got a lot of talent and the ability to be a top women's player, you definitely want to support as well. It's definitely a growing aspect of the game. There's clubs around New Zealand where there is actually really strong women turnout in tournaments as well. And you know, those players for that level are awesome players. And if you've got someone like Nicole who is representing New Zealand proud, and someone like that is an inspiration to look up to, it's only good things for the sport, and anyone representing New Zealand on the stage is great, and we want to see more New Zealanders up there representing our country and just playing darts and showing what we're capable of, because you know, those, as we say, those opportunities are very few and far between. So it's a lot of work to get to that position, but it can be rewarding once you get there.
Definitely, yeah. Hopefully we'll see more of her soon. And when we last spoke, you said you believed it wouldn't be long before a Kiwi won a tour card. Your prediction came true this year. Haupai Puha topping the European Q School Order of Merit. He didn't even need to play the last day. The job was done. How much of a milestone is that for New Zealand darts to now have a player on the tour?
Oh, look, it's such an awesome... it's so awesome. Like, I think I've been saying that for many years, though, so it's great it finally came true. But look, Haupai, he's been a great player on the New Zealand darts scene for quite a few years now, and for him to finally achieve that, there's always a lot of pressure on on the Kiwi guys as we touch on the whole money aspect side of trying to get over to that part of the world, especially at Christmas time, because often the guys that do go play in Q-School are over there to play in the World Champs, and they stay over there for a long period and then go to the Q-School. So they're over there for quite a while away from their families and trying to chase the dream, and there's always a lot of pressure on the guys that do that. And we've seen Cody Harris quite a few years ago fell just short a couple of times in Q-School and so close, but for Haupai to get that is awesome, and then for him to qualify for European Tour events, play at the UK Open. I think he beat Jelle Klassen in the first round on that main stage, and look, just seeing a Kiwi flag up there is just awesome. It's really good for the sport, and he's deserving of that mantle to be that first New Zealander. And I'll make the bold prediction now that hopefully Ben Robb, if he goes to Q-School this year, he gets a shot at the Tour card and gets it, and it can just kick on from here. And it's going to be such a big occasion for Haupai in a couple of weeks in Hamilton, being that first real major tournament that he's played in New Zealand since winning his Tour card. And I'm hoping he gets a rousing reception that he deserves, because what he's done is awesome. He's a trailblazer in New Zealand darts for achieving what he's done. So as long as he can keep flying that flag proudly and doing his best, that's all we can ask for. It's such a tough thing, leaving his partner and kids at home while he chases his dream. It can't be easy, a lot of pressure, but he's done such an awesome job so far. And as a Kiwi darts fan, can't be proud, have to be proud.
Good times, and we saw Haupai on our screens recently at the World Cup with Ben Robb, who you mentioned, and they pushed the host Germany all the way in the group stage, 42 left, and Gabriel Clemens takes out the 1-2-4 on the bull. A great finish, but that must have been gutting to see it happen against your players who played so well.
Oh, totally. I had a feeling you were going to bring this up, and look, it was one of those things where you were sitting there thinking, this is going to be such an awesome win. Confident. I was feeling confident, man. If they could beat Germany, they should beat Finland. They'll go through to that next stage, and Gabriel steps up and hits that triple 20. And it's one of those things where as soon as that first dart goes in, you just have that feeling. You have that feeling like he's going to hit this. And when he got it, it was a sense of, I was like, of course, bugger, he got it. But you had that sense in the back of your mind he was going to get it, but you were just hoping he was going to miss and New Zealand was going to get that shot to win it. The way I can describe it, the only way I can describe it is, it's not disappointment, because you're proud of the effort that they put up on that stage, and look, both Ben and Haupai played awesome darts across those two games. It's like heartbreak. It'd be like, I don't know, like let's use Liverpool as an example. Liverpool, on the cusp of winning the Premier League title, and Steven Gerrard slips over and Chelsea score, and you just watch it slip from your grasp, and it's just heartbreaking to see. Like, that's probably the best way I can describe it, using a bit of football analogy there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it was the first time that Haupai and Ben have teamed up together for that event, so lots of potential going forward. And the winners of the World Cup, they were England. Darts did come home, Luke Humphries and Michael Smith winning it. And we spoke to you about Michael last year. It was just after he signed up with the New Zealand darts brand Shot, and he's recently signed a long-term extension on that deal. And you said to us before there was a lot of excitement back home around the deal, one of the top players signing with Shot. So what has the impact been like in the last 12 months?
Yeah, look, I think it's one of those things where it's awesome seeing a top player wanting to have a New Zealand brand representing them, and it comes back to one of those things where it's just over in New Zealand, if there's any connection whatsoever, you just love to make it and be like, that's so cool. Michael Smith's darts are made here in New Zealand, and it's just that whole connection thing that New Zealanders just love to see. And I've seen quite a few of his darts around. I personally haven't had a throw with them myself, but I think it's just one of those cool things to see Michael Smith, see the Shot brand up there, and from a Shot perspective as well, it's just great seeing they've got quite a few players on the books now that are doing well. See Haupai, of course, he's under Shot as well. Just Bradley Brooks, just recently on the books too, and you've got some great players there just wearing that Shot brand, and just anything that connects New Zealand to these top players is just such an awesome thing.
Well, let's get on to you, and we'll come on to your next darts project in a moment. But away from the Oche, it sounds like it's been a challenging time for you. You told us you had a major accident last year. You've had a lot of time off work. Can you talk us through what happened?
Do you really want to know?
if you want to say.
No. So yeah, it was, how long ago was it now? Would have been, and so I'm just trying to do the maths in my head. Would have been coming on 9 months actually. For the record, I just want to state there was no drinking involved. It was pure stupidity. I was literally just trying to put on my shoes, and I fell through a glass door, and I cut through 3 tendons in my lower leg, 2 fully, 1 pretty much almost. Had a heap of nerves in my lower leg as well, so had surgery. Was pretty much out of action for the whole of Christmas period, which was, great for watching darts, but pretty limiting on anything else I could do. So over here, Christmas time is summer, so that's the kind of time you want to get out and go to the beach and have a good time doing that. So there was none of that for me this time around. So so I had that going on, and had a lot of time off work and took me out of action for quite a few things. So it was actually nice to be able to watch things like the darts and not really have to worry about anything, which was quite fun. But it's been quite like anything like that, it's a challenging process and things like that. But we're heading in the right direction. It's taken a little while, but we're getting there. So yeah, got that. And what else am I been doing since we last spoke? I started studying, which is quite fun, at university, which is something I've never done before. So month into that, which is quite a lot of fun too, and just trying to work away, get back into the routine of work, and hopefully get some good darts coverage out there very soon from a New Zealand perspective.
Well, I'm glad to hear the recovery's going well, and looking ahead to some good times coming soon. You're planning to start your own podcast focusing on New Zealand darts, so what are your plans for it, and any idea when we could see that first episode come out?
Yeah, look, I'm kind of hoping to have something at least up before the New Zealand Darts Masters, and hopefully I'll have be able to post my interviews up on there. In terms of how we're looking, and in terms of an actual launch, I'm not 100% too sure yet. Still trying to work through a few things and juggle this thing called life. So I guess the podcast, we want to be talking to the people that are playing New Zealand darts, representing New Zealand darts, and just give them a bit of a platform and a voice just to share their story about how they got into darts and some of the things that they've achieved in the sport. Because look, we all know the big names in New Zealand darts. We know our Haupai Puha.calls, we know our Ben Robs, we know our Warren Parrys. There's been some great flag bearers for New Zealand darts, but we want to talk to those people as well that have, let's call them the local pub heroes, the guys that are out there who have, achieved great things on the local scene. Just hear their stories, talk about people who have been involved in the sport, and even just chat things from a New Zealand perspective as well, because, this part of the world, we're not there firsthand seeing everything, so we see a lot from a New Zealand perspective, and just offer our perspective from New Zealand. So that's going to be the plan, but I'll hopefully have something up and running, as I say, where I can publish my interviews by the time New Zealand rolls around next week. In terms of when we actually get these interviews rolling, it's a bit of a TBC at the moment, but that's the plan.
Well, we look forward to that, and I'm assuming that you've tapped up your former co-host Ben Robb to come on the show as well.
I actually haven't, to be honest. We'll still say we'll try and work something out in terms of how we format it and how we do it. But we just want to get those voices out there and just share some stories, because there are some awesome stories out there, and even if one person hears it and they're inspired, to pick up a dart and have a throw and things like that, that's all you want out of it. So if it's just giving these guys a platform to hear their voice, because down here we're sick of hearing about our cricketers and our rugby players about how hard things are as a professional athlete collecting 6-figure paychecks. So let's hear from our real grinders, our real battlers and our dart players, and just trying to have fun, and what experiences that life has come around in darts and the things that they've achieved. So look, there's been, we can even talk to some of the guys who have just had the one shot up on those stages, and that they just had that one game, and even what that experience was like, and their takeaways from it and stuff like that. So there's some awesome stuff out there. So we'll look to tap into that. So it's going to be a lot of fun when we get that up and running.
Good stuff. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that, Ben. It's great to get you on the show and wish you all the best with the new project, and best of luck to all the New Zealand players in the World Series and what else is to come in 2024 as well.
Yeah, looking forward to it, guys. It should be a lot of fun. It's always our favourite time of the year when this rolls around. You get to see all the big names down here, and hopefully get a few of those Kiwi winners as well. That's what we love to see the most.
Thanks again to Ben for joining us, and we'll finish up the show with the mailbag. We've got 3 questions from our listeners before we go. The first of them comes from Jamie, who says, with the back end of the year approaching and tour card spots being decided for 2025, who do you think is most capable of making a shock surge into the top 64 by the end of the year?
All right, well, I have 3 names that I'm gonna mention, and I should mention that I appear to have accidentally deleted my notes on this, so I'm partially wigging this because I can't recall everyone I had on my list, but I've re-come up with 3 people, and I'll do it rapid fire. I'm going to start with Mervyn King. Right now, he's only 4,000 pounds out of the World Championship spots, and he's had some moments where I wouldn't say he looked like Mervyn King of old, but it certainly didn't look like old Mervyn King, who is old, like he did all of last year, and he's won some decent matches this year, and he's managed to start getting results more consistently over the last few months. You know, you look back earlier in the year, he lost 6 consecutive matches in Players' Championship events and couldn't get out of the second round until June. But he's now made a couple board finals. He beat Gabriel Clemens this past week with a good performance. He beats Peter Wright, not saying much, but averaged 103 in that match not that long ago. There's some good darts from Mervyn King right now, and if he can find a way to get to the World Championships and win a match there, which is not inconceivable right now, maybe, just maybe, he can steal back his tour card. So yeah, I think he hits the prompt on this. But I'll mention a couple other people who are currently in World Championship spots. I'll start, Nick Kenny. Right now, he's provisionally 14,500 pounds out of the top 64, but he's in the Players' Championship final. He's in the World Championships. That's going to be key, and winning matches there and continuing to make sure you qualify for that is the big thing. And I'll also then say similarly about Graham Hall, a player I don't think we've really talked about on this show, other than, right after he won his tour card. Well, he's also in the World Championships, also in the Players' Championship finals right now. So, those are the types of players that are in that position if they can just keep on trucking, keep on pushing on to get it done. And right now, both of them are doing it.
Yeah, some good picks there. And I'll mention a few names as well. And firstly, one that I think's probably left it too late now, unfortunately. But so he's not one of my answers, but I think he deserves a shout out this week. And that's Adam Warner. I think heading into last week, he picked up just 1 win in the Players' Championships this year. And after losing in the first round to Martin Schindler on the Wednesday and then being drawn against Gary Anderson, who averaged 123 in one game the day before, top of the averages in the Players' Championships. I don't think there were many people going into Thursday giving Adam much of a chance, but what a performance it was, a 96 average to knock off Gary Anderson in a last leg decider, and then to back it up as well with a win against Wessel Nyman, who made the final the day before. 2 big wins for Adam, and like I say, it's probably come too late now for him to get into that top 64 and keep his card, but 2 great wins for him, and great to see those chinos in person as well on Thursday. And a couple other names I'm going to mention, kind of cheating a little bit here, but it's probably not a shock the way he's playing, but Wessel Nyman, I think he's got to be in with a real shot now of making the top 64 by the end of the year. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, he's just made a final, but this is his first year with a tour card, and not many players in history have been able to get in that top 64 in 1 year. It's why the players get 2 years to get there, but he's going to be in Minehead, he's going to be at Ali Pali and barring a miracle on that last weekend on the development tour, he's going to be in the Grand Slam as well. So I think he gets in there. And the other player, they actually played each other last week, Wessel and Wesley Placier, his fellow Dutchman. We spoke about him recently after he made those back-to-back finals on the floor as a non-tour card holder, but he's making some good ground. He's cracking towards that top 64 without a tour card. And again, we talk about players getting into the top 64 first year of a tour card, that the list of players to do it without a tour card in a year even shorter. And I remember, Burton, you said a few weeks ago 30 grand is the magic number you're forecasting to make the World Championships via the Pro Tour list. Wesley now on 26 grand, so very close. And if he was to get a couple of wins at Ali Pali, knock off one of the seeds, maybe get a couple of wins at Minehead, that might be enough for him to get in that top 64.
Well, let's go from potential dark horses to get into the top 64 to potential dark horses to get to the Grand Prix. This question coming from Big G 180. Who is the dark horse to look out for qualifying for the World Grand Prix?
Yeah, good question. And I'll mention a couple of names for this one as well. And I mentioned him earlier. Seems strange saying it, but the world number 19, a dark horse to qualify for a major event. But Dirk van Dijvenbode, I think he is one to watch in this race for the World Grand Prix now. And given where he's come from, the tough times that he's had, and when you're in free fall, and I think he was in the top 10, I don't think he quite got to the top 8, but to then drop out of the top 16, miss the match play, and for a time this year, it's looked like he wasn't going to be able to stop that slider. I think he is on his way back now, so maybe the horse has bolted on calling him a dark horse. I should have backed him earlier, but I'm still going to mention him anyway. I think he is one to keep an eye on. And the other player, I'm going to make up for it now. This is a real dark horse, and that is Dom Taylor. I think he is one to watch. And at the moment, you look at the race to the World Grand Prix, he's quite far back, around 17, 18 grand off, and he's only qualified for one of the 4 remaining Euro Tours in this qualification period. But to have banked the best part of 30 grand already, and that's without one big run. It's not like he's won a title or made a final. I don't even think he's got to a semi-final or a quarter-final yet, but he's someone that when he gets on a roll, he can get hot, he can string together some results, put together some big averages, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if Dom Taylor makes a final on the floor before the end of this season. And if he can do it in the next 2 months, that's 10 grand on your ranking. He's closed the majority of that gap in one day, in one event. And the Combine Harvester song as well as a walk-on, you can't not love that, can you? So he's a good character, Dom, and sorry if I've jinxed him here with my tip, but if I'm going to go with a dark horse, someone that is in the first year of their tour card, I think he's got an outside chance.
Well, I'll go with a dark horse that I've talked about before, but not in a while on this show, and that's Richard Veenstra. Right now, he's about 10,000 pounds behind, but he's in 2 of the 4 Euro Tour events, and that's a big opportunity, especially for a player who I think is still to some extent finding his feet in the PDC. And a big event, a big run on the Euro Tour, I think, is that next step for him. And if he can get one in either of those 2, making a semifinal, okay, that's not going to get him into it, but it's going to pull him closer to contention. And if he can turn that semifinal into a final, well, now suddenly he's really legitimately in that race. And I do think that's coming at some point. I think Richard Veenstra has that run in him at some time. But I also think he's coming into a bit better form than you might think. Sure, he's lost a lot of matches recently, but in his last 10 matches in the Players' Championship events, he's been above his seasonal average in 8 of them. 80% of the time, he's doing better than he's doing in an average performance. And 3 of those 4 were three of those matches were first-round exits. So even though he was losing, he was playing well. The luck will at some point turn. And I talked about him last year, about the fact that it took great performances to beat him, and how in his first 21, I think, Players' Championship events, every player to beat him was either a major finalist or Riccardo Pietreczko, who had won a Euro Tour at that point. And that's the type of player that it takes. At some point, Richard Veenstra is going to have it all click, and he's going to have that run. And if it happens in the next 10 events, if he gets that first Players' Championship title, if he gets a deep run on the Euro Tour, that could, along with some decent results in the other 8 or 9 events, be enough to get him into the World Grand Prix. So he's my dark horse to make it to Leicester.
And the last of our listener questions comes from another friend of the show, Lee Fox, who says, with all the good news surrounding the Olympics and the rise of darts, should darts be an Olympic sport?
If you had asked me this 8 years ago, my answer would have been different. I would have said no. At that point, I didn't think the depth was there. Even though, yes, sure, people played darts, but especially if we're talking steel tip darts, it was still relatively limited, the global reach of the game, both in terms of participation and especially at the youth level. But that's changed. It's now played pretty much everywhere in Europe. It's growing in many places in the Americas. It's even, you're seeing now in the African tour, the investment there has now led to players going from Botswana and other countries to the events who are not too shabby, and you're seeing people pick it up. There are unquestionably enough countries where there is legitimate participation that I think it would be merited. So yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, I would like to see it. I think darts is global enough, certainly more global than some of the other sports that are already at the Olympics. So my answer is yes.
Yeah, first of all, just say, great question, Foxy. The darts in the Olympics debate, it's been doing the rounds for the last few weeks in the lead up to the Olympics, and whilst it's been on as well. And funnily enough, with my job at Darts Corner, we did put together a blog on this exact question: should darts be in the Olympics? And we looked at both sides of the argument. You've got some of the top pros like Michael van Gerwen, Luke Humphries, Michael Smith, all saying yes, and then you've got pundits and former pros like Wayne Mardle and John Part being against it. Barry Hearn, he's come out recently and said he doesn't want darts in the Olympics, and at the start I was against it. I agreed with Wayne's argument that the Olympics should be the pinnacle of a sport, like in athletics and some of the other sports. Getting your hands on a gold medal is the top of the achievements, whereas a gold medal compared to a world championship at Ali Pali doesn't quite stack up, does it? But the more I think about it, I'm starting to be swayed in the other direction, and I think, why not? If you've got other sports like golf and tennis, which have their own professional tours, they can be in it, then why can't darts? And the blog we wrote, it does include an update from the WDF, who have been the organisation overseeing darts' bid to be included, and it's stalled a little bit somewhat because of COVID, but they are looking to resurrect it again. And I think that's an interesting point to finish on, because if darts was to be included in the Olympics, most likely wouldn't involve the PDC. They wouldn't be the ones running it, so you're unlikely to see Humphries, Littler and co, not that one. It would be non-tour card holders. And would it have the same effect, the same impact, not seeing the big names like you do in the golf and tennis at the Olympics? It would be more like boxing with the amateurs involved. So I think the jury is still out at the moment, but I think the benefits would outweigh any of the negatives in getting darts on the list for the Olympic sport. So yeah, I think go for it.
Anything else for this week?
As always, got to say a few thank yous. Thank you to our guests, to Haupai and Ben, for joining us. Thank you to our sponsors, to Darts Corner, Condor Darts and Quiff, for their continued support of the show. Links in the description. Do go and check them out. I've got to say as well, thank you to Dowell Fitting and Mission Darts for the invite to the Pro Tour last week. It's probably the closest I'm going to get to a professional event. I won't be playing in it, so it was a great experience being up close and seeing behind the scenes how these Players Championship events work, and seeing all the players there as well. And hopefully I'll get to go to a few more in the future as well. And whilst I was there, I did manage to grab a chat with Wessel Nyman, so that chat is going to be on next week's show, so you're going to have to hang tight for that. But as we always say, thanks to our listeners as well for the continued support. We're going to be back next week. You're going to hear from Wessel next week, but until then, enjoy the darts.
Yes, indeed. It is August. It's always the slowest month on the calendar, so please keep your questions coming. Let us know anything you want us to cover. Hopefully this will be a chance for us to get to some of the tour card holders that we've not had a chance to. It's obviously a busy calendar, but this is that time. So let us know who you want on. Let us know what you want us to talk about. Keep your questions coming, and we will talk to you next week. Well, give me 12 seconds. We're just playing way in the corner right now. The final whistle should go any second. In fact, I want to hear the final whistle.
And the referee is looking at her watch. The USA are climbing back up the mountain and will play for gold in Paris on Saturday.
Okay, good. That's all I wanted. That's all I needed.